And good morning, Happy New Year. It's good to be back at Oakmont. My mother-in-law lives here. I've been here many times, and just between you and me, I've sort of got my eye on this place for the future. First of all, what qualifies me to speak about this is not that I'm a physician, because physicians are not taught about climate change. But I must say that since my training in Nashville in 2007, I have applied exactly the same techniques of study and looking at the official literature, the scientific literature, the same literature that I use in my emergency medicine practice, which is evidence-based, to come to the conclusions that I will share with you today. Preventing climate chaos is the greatest ultimate challenge of our civilization. And let's be very clear, what is at risk in climate chaos? It is civilization itself. It's taken life over 3 billion years to get from this kind of a scene of stromatolites, primitive life, to primates. And from there, 2 million years ago, humans evolved into Stone Age builders of our civilization. That's when it began. It began after the Ice Age, when the climate that we have lived in for the last 10,000 years got nice. And that is what we're risking right now. We've made very quick progress, haven't we? From 10,000 years in Stone Age to manned flight, less than a human lifetime to the first spacewalk. A few years later, our Hubble Space Telescope peered into a part of the sky where there was nothing of interest, and after a 10-day exposure, captured light that had started its journey to Earth at the beginning of time, shortly after the Big Bang. And since that time, our civilization has grown a nervous system worldwide where just about anybody can plug in for free, instantaneously, to everything that is known and communicate. We are one organism on this planet now. And shortly after that, another 12 years, in this joyous scene from last summer of 2012, these young engineers landed a robot the size of a Hummer on the surface of Mars perfectly. That's what we have accomplished. And nobody can tell me that our engineers are not capable of digging us out of the climate hole that we have dug for ourselves. It does sort of make you stop and think about where are we going? And is what we've built, is what we have received from our ancestors, and is what we are going to pass on to our descendants sustainable? So in order to know where you're going, you kind of have to know where you've been. And let me say at the outset, I trust the science. I trust the geologists, the atmospheric chemists, the physicists, the supercomputers they've got. I trust in science. I'm a doctor. Climate science is actually much more in agreement with itself than medicine, I'll tell you that. So where have we been? We're here at time 0 today, in a period of time when the Earth is relatively cool. It's been much hotter. You know, swamps on Greenland and Antarctica. That's why there's so much oil up there. So this chart goes back almost 70 million years. When it was very hot, the planet was a marsh, and look at how high the temperatures were back then compared to the 0, which is what it is now for comparison. 8 to 12 degrees centigrade warmer only. Just that kind of variation in average surface temperature over time can produce these enormous changes in the Earth's climate. And of course, the Earth has cooled since then due to very good physical reasons. The ice tells the story. We've been able to drill through ice cores practically to 1 million years ago, slice them up, measure the bubbles of trapped atmosphere to determine what the temperatures were, what was in the atmosphere in terms of greenhouse gases. And this is what we found. The blue is carbon dioxide concentration. It's gone up and down and up and down and up and down for a long time. Humans, by the way, came in and around here, where it was cold, very cold. And the concentration of CO2 goes up and down over time due to physical variation in the planet, and the temperature goes up and down and up and down and up and down. Does anybody see a correlation there? Like a glove on the hand. CO2 and its greenhouse gas cousins, methane, nitrous oxide, water vapor, etc., determine the temperature of the planet. This is high school physics. Temperature's gone up and down and up and down and up and down over a long time. We came out of an ice age, and this is our period of time. This is where all of human history and everything we value has taken place. And since we got hold of coal and machines that burn it, we have jacked the concentration of CO2 up to 400, where before it was 280 parts per million. What's going to happen? What do you think is going to happen? What must happen? The situation is this. We have built a glorious civilization, probably the most advanced, as far as we know, in the entire universe. And we've done it using this wonderful, rich, concentrated source of energy, fossil fuels, which nature has given us as a gift to build our civilization. And we have. We are burning billions of tons of this stuff, and by a process of chemistry, oxidation, it spews CO2 into the air. This is just chemistry. There's no way around it. The problem is when CO2 goes into the air, it doesn't go away very fast. It can last hundreds of years to 1,000 years. And if you look at the ice cores back 2,000 years ago, these are ice cores drilled in the north and south in Antarctica and Greenland. Using the measurements in the ice cores of the trapped air bubbles, we see what CO2 concentration has been until the 1800s, when you know what happened. And it's going up and up and up in a straight line. And this past May, it hit a concentration that we have not seen in at least 3 million years. That's before primates. Why is this important? It's important because we live on a living planet that's sitting in space which is absolutely zero cold. And we have a planet with an average temperature a little less than 60 degrees Fahrenheit. We have life. We have our civilization. We're here because of that. If it weren't that way, we wouldn't be here. Let's not screw it up. The greenhouse gas concentrations determines the temperature. Mars has barely an atmosphere. It's the temperature of a cold day in Antarctica. Venus has a runaway greenhouse effect, very concentrated CO2 in there, and it's hot enough on Venus to melt lead. It's hotter on Venus than it is on Mercury, which of course has no atmosphere. It boiled off long ago, because the gases trap the heat. The Earth is in a positive energy balance. We are retaining excess heat the way you would if you wrapped yourself in 2 down quilts and put on your ski gear. Not in that order. We are retaining heat. That's why it's getting warmer. How much heat is being retained? This number blows my mind. Hiroshima bombs every second, that's a lot of heat. But where's it going? Why aren't we broiled already? Well, if you were heat energy and you wanted to live somewhere comfortable, where would you want to live? In air? Who has forced air ventilation systems in their homes? You know air doesn't retain heat. The moment it stops working, you're cold again, right? You want to be in water. Dense, good heat conductor, massive. The Earth is 3/4 covered by the oceans, so that's where the excess heat energy is going. It's going into the oceans. But eventually, we are going to warm more than we already have. Because the CO2 concentrations, thanks to our addiction to fossil fuels, is going through the roof, and we're not really doing very much about it. And if that happens, where must temperature go? High school physics. Where must it go? It's going to go up. And here's the reconstruction of the temperatures since the end of the last ice age, 11,000 years ago. We came out of it, the Earth warmed, it bounced around, it got a little warmer, then it came down. And for the last 1,000 years, the temperatures on the planet have actually been falling, as you would expect in these things that have a periodicity due to the natural variations in the Earth's orbit. But here's what's been detected. That, my friends, is a fever spike. Anyone who's ever had pneumonia knows what it's like to get that initial fever. It hits you like a truck. Your teeth are chattering. You're spiking a fever. The Earth is spiking a fever. This is the infamous hockey stick curve that goes back 2,000 years. And when this is detected, that's a bad sign. This graph got the author of this graph death threats. He's been this huge vitriolic personal attacks on this scientist, Michael Mann, that have all, of course, been rebuffed. We are being warned, and we've been warned.
If we fail to reduce the emission of greenhouse gases, deadly heat waves and droughts will become more frequent, coastal areas will flood, and economies will be disrupted. That is going to happen unless we act.
And here we have a serious problem. America is addicted to oil.
That so many of us are here today is recognition that the threat from climate change is serious, it is urgent, and it is growing. Our generation's response to this challenge will be judged by history. For if we fail to meet it boldly, swiftly, and together, we risk consigning future generations to an irreversible catastrophe. No nation, however large or small, wealthy or poor, can escape the impact of climate change. Rising sea levels threaten every coastline. More powerful storms and floods threaten every continent. More frequent droughts and crop failures breed hunger and conflict in places where hunger and conflict already thrive. On shrinking islands, families are already being forced to flee their homes as climate refugees. The security and stability of each nation and all peoples, our prosperity, our health, and our safety are in jeopardy. And the time we have to reverse this tide is running out.
Good evening. At a time when so many people are still suffering, right now, tonight, more than 1 month after a monster storm hit a giant population center, today we learned some facts about how this Earth is changing and how fast. For starters, polar ice sheets in Greenland are melting at 5 times the pace of just a few years ago. New research concludes that Antarctica is melting. While it takes a lot of ice to melt to raise ocean levels, they say that is in fact happening, and they believe just an incremental recent rise of ocean levels made the damage worse when Hurricane Sandy hit the East Coast and took so much away from us. The big question mark is the future, of course, and a new kind of normal for all those living along the water. It's where we begin here tonight. Our Chief Environmental Affairs Correspondent, Ann Thompson's here with us. And Ann, how did we learn all of this today?
Well, the information comes from a group of international scientists, Brian, and it shows that we are living climate change in real time. Growing zones in this country are moving north. This July was the warmest month on record, and tonight there is new information that reveals just how fast the world's ice sheets are melting. The numbers are staggering. 344 billion metric tons tons of ice melting in Antarctica and Greenland a year, the weight of more than 1 million Empire State Buildings. The alarming findings published today in the journal Science from a team of international researchers who looked at the data gathered over the last 20 years, creating what they say is the most accurate picture of melting. In Antarctica, the East region is gaining ice, but it's not enough to make up for the loss on the rest of the continent. In Greenland, a record 97% of the ice sheet thawed this July, as shown here in red. Today, it is losing ice 5 times faster than in the early 1990s.
The faster speeds that we're seeing in Greenland are not going to slow down. That's not the way ice sheets behave.
The melting accounts for 20% of sea level rise in the past 2 decades, according to the study, adding 11 millimeters. It doesn't sound like much until you consider it's like pouring in more than 26 Lake Tahoes.
Antarctica and Greenland are the vastest reservoirs of ice on the planet. All told, they hold hundreds of feet of sea level rise.
And that's the worry. Many of the world's cities are in the crosshairs.
Most of the people around the world live in coastal areas. It's where most of your major cities are because that's where ports are. And they are at sea level. So even small changes in sea level rise can displace millions of people.
Look at what could happen to cities on the East Coast. This could be the impact of 5 feet of sea level rise. This is 25 feet, which some experts say could happen in just a few centuries. Today, New Jersey and New York are still recovering from the punishing effect of Sandy, a storm fueled by higher seas. In Greenland, photographer Jim Baylog used time-lapse cameras to record the melting 5 years ago.
I want to show people the reality of what's happening.
What he found here and around the world is now the subject of the documentary Chasing Ice.
Oh my God. The net effect is that more ice is going into the ocean as it's speeding up.
Confirmed by the results of today's study. Now, another report this week says sea level rise is happening 60% faster than the United Nations predicted in 2007. This is all critical information because more than half of all Americans live within 50 miles of the coastline. Brian?
Bracing bunch of numbers today. Ann Thompson leading us off tonight. Ann, thanks.
It seems so strange to wake up in the morning to the most glorious weather we have here in California, as everybody else is freezing and digging out all over the country, and to realize that this weather is toxic. This weather is totally abnormal. I'd rather, frankly, it was raining. I'd feel better. So all things are local. I could spend a lot of time talking about impacts on California, but suffice it to say, we're really vulnerable here. So that's not even the whole thing. It's not just about weather. We are disrupting geological features on this planet, like melting the Arctic. And as the Arctic melts, the permafrost that's just below the frozen part, it's supposed to be permanently frozen, that contains billions of tons of fossil carbon, is starting to thaw. And when that happens, it's going to outgas methane, which is an actually more powerful greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide. What I want to do here.
Oh my God!
You've got to be a graduate student at about the age of 25 to do something that stupid. There were no serious burns, just a few, eyebrows got seared. This is a very serious problem. And the other problem is that the oceans are pumping acid into the oceans. Now, the pH of the ocean, the acidity, has already gone up 30%. The pH is on track to go from about 8.4 down to 8.0. And those of you who understand that, great, I'm not going to go into it. But you're acidifying the oceans by that much, 0.4 pH units. Now, what does that mean? If any of you were to show up in my emergency department, code 3, with a pH that was that acidic compared to what your normal pH ought to be, which I guarantee is 7.40 right now, everybody, unless you're on dialysis. You have a pH of 7.40. If you drop that down to 7.0, you are, as we say, circling the drain. Going down. And you require resuscitation because you've had a massive heart attack, you're septic, you're in shock, you've had an accident, you've lost half your blood volume. That's what we're going to do to the oceans. Now, is that behavior commensurate with a civilization that can land a Hummer on Mars? Really? That is just plain stupid. And it will be an evolutionary test for us as to whether our smarts actually have survival value, or should nature simply have stopped with the gorillas. I don't want it to be that way. It doesn't have to be that way. We've got the technology to not have to go down that road, where we knowingly destroy the marine ecosystem, the thing that produces our oxygen, the base of the food chain, plankton. They have little calcium exoskeletons, a very thin layer of calcium. If you acidify the ocean, that stuff dissolves. We can do better than that. And we can do better on the moral and ethical issues as well, because the people who have contributed the least to this problem are the ones that will suffer the most, because they tend to be poor, coastal, and they don't have the infrastructure. When the oceans will flood, there's not going to be the National Guard coming in to restore water and provide FEMA to provide shelter and food for you. It's going to be a disaster. And they're mad about it, because they didn't cause this. And they should be. But there are solutions to that. We just need to give them the technology. Let them jump ahead, the way they did with cell phones. There have been 5 mass extinctions in geological history, and we're creating the 6th. We are wiping out species at an alarming rate, not just due to global warming, but land use and pollution and overfishing and grazing and all that stuff. Population explosion, bad. But climate change makes all of that much worse, because animals and plants have difficulty adapting to their new circumstances. And it's all happening incredibly fast. And when you hear people say, oh, climate change, it's happened before. The Earth has been hot. You know, it's been this, it's been that. Yes, that's right. But never at this pace. And the pace matters because, hey, if you've got 100,000 years, plants and animals can adapt. If you've got 1,000 years, they can't. Corals don't just get up and move. Trees that are at the top of a mountain can't go higher. The scientific literature on this has more consensus in it than in the medical literature that I follow. You know, we don't even know how to treat sore throats, frankly. You and me. But when 99.8% of the peer-reviewed, that means the experts are studying the experts, giving them hints, rejecting papers, saying no. Methodology, these are the experts. We got to listen to the experts. Do you listen to experts? You have a health problem? You bet you do. You've got a neurosurgeon and, you know, you go to the experts. These are the experts. They agree. And every country with a National Academy of Science agrees on the basic facts that humans are causing climate change because of our emission of greenhouse gases, period. This is settled. However, this is part 2. We just did the science. This is the denial. And it's the single most dangerous thing that's going on in our civilization. Even our dear president, our hero, failed to mention climate in his first term or the re-election campaign until Hurricane Sandy crammed this issue down everyone's throat. Wasn't there.
Man-made global warming is a hoax.
George, the idea that carbon dioxide is a carcinogen that's harmful to our environment, it's almost comical.
I didn't make this up. And I didn't make this up. I'll explain this. This on the left with the big black circle is the consensus among climate scientists that climate change is happening in human cost. Pretty basic, simple statement, right? This is what the public thinks. 60% of them don't know, or they don't think it is, because they've been listening to those guys. This is a huge political disaster because you can't address this problem if the people don't recognize it. The gap between the scientists and the public is the most dangerous information gap we've ever faced. Because, as Obama said, the time to address these problems is running out. And yet we have a country in America where this is the distribution of concern. On the left, 16% are alarmed, like me. Anybody else alarmed? Oh, good. All right, this is not a typical audience. And over here on 8%, it's a crock, it's a hoax, it's Al Gore trying to make money. Anyone? Here, my friends. It's okay, we won't jump on you. And then you have this big middle. Notice that concerned and alarmed is a pretty big percentage of the population, right? Why can't the percentage of the population that big cause the politicians to act? So how did we actually get here?
It is the judgment of the committee that cigarette smoking contributes substantially to mortality from certain specific diseases and to the overall death rate.
The taste is great.
In January 1964, the Surgeon General published a comprehensive report linking cigarette smoke with cancer and other deadly diseases. Yet it would take decades before the public accepted the true dangers of smoking.
Did you say I'll feel better smoking, Philip Morris?
Yes, you'll feel better.
How did the tobacco companies manage to lie to the public in the face of all the scientific evidence? They realized that the science didn't need to be disproven. It was enough to create doubt in the minds of the public to keep them from recognizing the truth.
Tens of thousands of doctors in all branches of medicine, in all parts of the country, were asked that question. What cigarette do you smoke, doctor? The brand named most was Camel.
The cigarette companies sought to reassure the public that their product wasn't dangerous.
That is wonderful.
Even though it was, and they knew it to be so at the time.
The medical specialist stated that the ears, nose, throat, and accessory organs of all participating subjects examined by me were not adversely affected in the 6 months period by smoking the cigarettes provided.
Where did this fake science come from? The tobacco industry funded private institutes and individuals to create phony science and disseminate it, creating the appearance there was a debate where there was none. Much of this phony science came from this man, Dr. Frederick Seitz, and the institute he co-founded, the Marshall Institute. Their principal strategy was to defend the products by insisting the science was unsettled, and therefore it was premature for the government to act. The Marshall Institute used this same strategy to campaign against the dangers of acid rain, ozone depletion, and DDT.
Used right, it is absolutely harmless to humans and animals.
Then, in the 1990s, they began a new doubt and denial campaign that would prove more deadly than anything that had come before. This time, Seitz and the Marshall Institute were being funded by the petroleum industry. With funding from oil and gas companies, think tanks and front groups were formed. Their purpose was to raise questions about the reality of climate change and convince politicians and the media that the science was unsettled.
The science is suggesting that maybe all of this isn't really happening, or it's not really dangerous, or it's not really man-made.
Holes are being poked in the whole theory of global warming.
Global warming is the biggest delusion of our lifetime. Man doesn't control his climate.
God controls the climate. Come on!
Evaluating propaganda isn't that simple. Recognizing the technique is one step. Another step is to know the purpose.
Underlying it all is a simple concept. The public can't understand the complex science of climate change. So convince them that the scientists don't fully comprehend it yet either, and then persuade them that without sound science, it makes no sense to take preventative action.
Please consider yourself to be under oath.
Let me begin my questioning on the matter of whether or not nicotine is addictive.
I believe nicotine is not addictive yet.
Carbon dioxide is not a harmful gas.
And the more CO2 that's in the atmosphere, the better plants grow.
There is a theological debate that this is a carbon-starved planet.
You believe nicotine is not addictive?
I believe that nicotine is not addictive.
And that the Earth is actually cooling now.
Turns out the planet may be cooling.
The globe hadn't warmed in the last decade.
The science is wrong. The economics is wrong.
None of this snake oil science stuff that is based on this global warming, Gore-Gate stuff.
There are a substantial number of scientists who have manipulated data.
Forget about all that global warming.
I don't believe climate change is real.
Do I believe scientists? No!
I'm confused. How can you know what to believe when there's so much propaganda?
The truth can only remain hidden for so long. In reality, there is no remaining reasonable doubt about man's influence on climate change. This time, it is not the lives of millions at stake, but billions.
And I too believe that nicotine is not addictive.
Any ex-smokers here? You want to comment on that sworn statement by a corporate executive? It's still happening. The money has disappeared from the corporate side into the private side, and you have, thanks to Citizens United, dark money being contributed, $500 million at least last year by individuals who cannot be identified to charitable organizations. So we're really up against a denial machine that you might say is infinitely well-funded. It's infinitely well-funded and very well-established. So I don't know how you fight that kind of money except with this kind of an event, education, where I hope you walk out of here completely immunized, roll up your sleeves, against climate denial propaganda, which is everywhere. But some people are fighting it, and I'm very excited to announce who here can get Showtime on your television. It's worth subscribing to. It's coming from the maker of Avatar.
99 scientists out of 100 say climate change is real and it's only going to get worse. So if you were sick and you got 100 doctors and 99 of them said you had to have an operation, would you get another opinion? I don't think so.
Our world is changing faster and more dramatically than ever before.
Not true. Global warming ended in 1998. I'll show you the data for it.
There's so many political agendas, it's been so many exaggerations that it's brought a lot of confusion.
Ice melt, rising sea levels.
There is no wildfire season. We have wildfires all year round.
Why do you think Republicans have gotten in this spot distrusting the scientists?
Methane coming out of pipes all over the country. That's a big deal.
At what point does this become the priority? Fire commencing.
Everybody thinks that this is about melting glaciers and polar bears. I think it's a big mistake. This is 100% of people's story. So I've teamed up with the legendary Jerry Weintraub.
Hurricanes are twice as bad as they ever were. Ice is melting where it's not supposed to melt.
This is a lake?
Yes.
The world is changing, and it's all because of global warming, I think.
Jerry and I are putting together the ultimate catch. You'll see these stars like you've never seen them before. They're going to be the correspondents, meeting the people affected by this. These are the stories of people whose lives have been transformed by climate change.
We used to have seasons back then. Now we don't.
Could Yemen run out of water?
Yes, possible.
This was the first city to run out of water.
Water just took everything away.
Climate disruption is not a political issue, it's a moral issue.
I'm more positive. It doesn't matter. It's happening.
This is the biggest story of our time. And this is the time to tell it.
Nothing could have prepared us for what we saw.
I can't wait for this. So we're back to our first question. Is our civilization sustainable? I like to always ask the audience, how many of you who think that if we keep going the way we're going, business as usual, that our civilization is going to be thriving in 1,000 years? 500? Do I hear 500, 500, 500, 500? Going once. 250, 250, 250. Anyone for 250? You are pessimists. 200, 150, 150, 150 years. I got one in the back, 150 years, 100. We're going to be here in 100 years, 100 years. Do I hear any for, okay, okay. 150, going once, going twice. Up, another. 200, 200. We're getting more optimistic now. And by the way, I want you to be optimistic because we can do this. All we have to do is adapt. Adapt, right? We've been doing that since forever. That's how we got here. So what do we do to survive? What is the adaptation that we need to make in order for our civilization not to go down the tubes? Is it changing your light bulbs? Is it going to the farmer's market? Limiting your driving, getting a hybrid car? Or plug-in electric, solar on your roof? Come on, what is it? It's all of the above, and it's none of the above. It's all of the above plus. A sound, comprehensive energy policy. Now, I don't know what you think of Dick Cheney. And you don't want to know what I think of Dick Cheney. But this is something I totally agree with. These personal things that people do, you know, the ones that are at the end of An Inconvenient Truth, the movie is as a creditor rolling, it's saying, do less, change your light bulbs. And it's like, what? There's a cognitive dissonance here. This is the biggest problem humanity has ever faced, and you're expecting me to solve it by changing light bulbs and going to Home Depot? No, it doesn't work that way. How do we get a sound energy policy? And what would it look like? Hint, it's a tax, and it would be effective worldwide. But what do we need to do first? We need to all get on the same page. And the way to get everybody on the same page is to give one solution that's easy, that can be implemented, that's got a chance, and that would be effective. But the first thing we need to do is get together. We need a movement. Have you ever heard of 90% of economists agreeing on anything? Well, here's the one thing that they agree on. We need to tax carbon the way we tax other things we don't like cigarettes. and alcohol. Why does that work? Because of leverage. Let me ask you a question. If Ben Bernanke or Janet Yellen belches at a press conference, is that reported in the Wall Street Journal as a possible signal that the Fed is going to do something? And if they're going to do something, what is it that they're going to do? They're going to tweak the overnight interest rates charged between banks by 0.25%. And if they do that, it's front page news because it has an enormous effect as it ripples through the economy. A little micro tweak gives you a huge macro impact. The way this little guy is jacking up his father's 1955 Buick, he weighs 60 pounds. What's he doing? He's using leverage and a machine. That's me, by the way. What I liked to do when I was 5. So when you got a guy like Greg Mankiw, who was the advisor to George W. Bush and Mitt Romney, saying we need a tax. This is an op-ed piece in the New York Times from late August. Time to listen up, because it means you might get some Republican support. When you have a guy like former Secretary of Treasury State George Shultz writing an op-ed piece in the Wall Street Journal of why we support a revenue-neutral carbon tax, along with the Nobel Prize-winning co-author Gary Becker, you've got something there. It's time to listen up. So I made an appointment with him down at Hoover at Stanford. And he's very interested in our organization, Citizens Climate Lobby, because we're promoting him and what he's doing. And we chuckled about, do you call it a fee or do you call it a tax? Because that's a semantic debate. Because we think fee goes over better with people, because when you say tax, they get hives. Schultz chuckles and said, well, you know, if the government doesn't keep the money, it's not a tax, is it? I thought that was good. Treasury Secretary, you ought to know. But don't take it from me. Take it from the world's greatest climate scientist, James Hansen, who long ago was the first to issue a warning to Congress that they've detected signs of global warming. And here he is, 25 years later, telling us why the way out is a carbon fee and dividend.
How did I get dragged deeper and deeper into an attempt to communicate? Giving talks in 10 countries, getting arrested, burning up the vacation time that I had accumulated over 30 years. More grandchildren helped me along. Jake is a super positive, enthusiastic boy. Here at age 2.5 years, he thinks he can protect his 2.5-day-old little sister. It would be immoral to leave these young people with a climate system spiraling out of control. Now, the tragedy about climate change is that we can solve it with a simple, honest approach of a gradually rising carbon fee collected from fossil fuel companies and distributed 100% electronically every month to all legal residents on a per capita basis, with the government not keeping one dime. Most people would get more in the monthly dividend than they pay in increased prices. This fee and dividend would stimulate the economy and innovations, creating millions of jobs. It is the principal requirement for moving us rapidly to a clean energy future. Several top economists are co-authors on this proposition. Jim DePeso of Republicans for Environmental Protection describes it thusly: transparent, market-based, does not enlarge government, leaves energy decisions to individual choices, sounds like a conservative climate plan. But instead of placing a rising fee on carbon emissions to make fossil fuels pay their true cost to society, our governments are forcing the public to subsidize fossil fuels by $400 to $500 billion per year worldwide, thus encouraging extraction of every fossil fuel: mountaintop removal, longwall mining, fracking, tar sands, tar shale, deep ocean, Arctic drilling. This path, if continued, guarantees that we will pass tipping points, leading to ice sheet disintegration that will accelerate out of control of future generations, A large fraction of species will be committed to extinction, and increasing intensity of droughts and floods will severely impact breadbaskets of the world, causing massive famines and economic decline. Imagine a giant asteroid on a direct collision course with Earth. That is the equivalent of what we face now. Yet we dither, taking no action to divert the asteroid, even though the longer we wait, the more difficult and expensive it becomes. If we'd started in 2005, it would have required emission reductions of 3% per year to restore planetary energy balance and stabilize climate this century. If we start next year, it is 6% per year. If we wait 10 years, it is 15% per year. Extremely difficult and expensive, perhaps impossible. But we aren't even starting. So now you know what I know that is moving me to sound this alarm. Clearly, I haven't got this message across. The science is clear. I need your help to communicate the gravity and the urgency of this situation and its solutions more effectively. We owe it to our children and grandchildren. Thank you.
So what would that look like? How would it work? Here's the bare bones of it. First thing, a steeply rising fee is placed on carbon-based fuels at their source, the mine, the wellhead, the port of entry. Within a decade, clean energy will be cheaper than fossil fuels, because fossil fuels are artificially cheap. They're not paying for their social costs. All that money, and it's trillions over time, is taken in by the Treasury and given back to everybody. You, and you, every legal resident, every household. So that prices are going to go up. Your gas goes up 10 cents for every $10 a ton. Not much, but could be $1 a gallon over 10 years. You get your dollar back in the mail, or electronically, wherever you want it. The government doesn't keep the money. Politicians are out of the loop. Immediately, industry leaders or business people will perceive a price signal indicating that fossil fuels will soon be more expensive than renewables. What are they going to do? They're going to shift investment. And competition for energy efficiency will drive incredible innovation. Think of it. Think of the potential Silicon Valleys springing up all over the country doing this kind of work. Private capital, which is measured in trillions, sitting in accounts that can't seem to earn any money, will pour into the clean tech industrial revolution. We're not talking about massive government funding. And the markets will pick winners and losers, not politicians and bureaucrats. Markets are ruthless, they act quickly. If something isn't working, it's gone. Millions of jobs, many, many more than in the fossil fuel industry, will be created. And by working with World Trade Organization, border adjustments, very important, border adjustments will level the playing field between countries and incentivize others to follow the American lead. And we'll be bypassing this UN process, which has been going on for almost 20 years. It hasn't produced very much at all. Border tax adjustments are the way to do it. And if just the US and China would strike a bargain, we're the two biggest economies, everybody else would follow suit. And in fact, big companies are already assuming that this is going to happen. There was an article in the New York Times a month ago. They listed 29 of the biggest companies, such as these, who are already factoring into their business plans and their spreadsheets an eventual carbon tax. So, like, we want to go to these guys and say, okay, so you're not opposed to it? You've obviously shown you can manage paying with a carbon fee. You've done it. You've internalized it. How about going public with that and saying, you know what? We can live with this. We won't oppose it. That would be huge. Yes, it's a tax, but it's a tax swap. It's revenue neutral. Who would have thought that this man would become the president of South Africa after 27 years in prison? Who would have thought? And yet it was due to popular pressure worldwide. Our president, I think, wants to do the right thing, and he's asking us for it.
Let me say this as a politician. I can promise you this. Political leaders will never take risks if the people do not push them to take some risks. You must create the change that you want to see. Ordinary people can accomplish extraordinary things.
And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to push a plan that can be accepted by everybody across our very fractious political spectrum. We've got huge Republican support in their figures like George Shultz, and the Democrats, of course, would like to do this too. Our own Senator Boxer has put a bill like this out. Jared Huffman, our representative here, is eager to be a climate hero. But we must act in unison, putting away other differences, because what we must do in order to win this fight is to harness the power of money and markets for the purpose of civilization's survival. Without it, we're toast. With it, we've got a chance. Without it, we're fighting with our hands tied behind our backs. And there are probably people, I know there's at least one, who have been in combat, and you know you don't want to have your hands tied behind your back, right, Bill? You bet. This happens to be me, being arrested in front of the White House at a civil disobedience a few years ago, which was catapulted me into the organization that I really love, Citizens Climate Lobby. It is nonpartisan, it is grassroots. We are working on building political will for a livable climate by working for a revenue-neutral carbon tax with 100% dividend back to the population. We're using our democratic process. We write letters to the editor. This year, over 1,000 letters to the editor published in the United States. We meet with federal legislatures. We write op-ed pieces, over 200. We meet with editorial boards and urge them to publish friendly editorials. This year we got 40 in the US. And we meet with the editorial board editors. Chapters are going up exponentially all over the US. This number is already obsolete. It's probably hitting 200 by now in the US and Canada. It's the organization to watch, and I'm so excited to be part of it. I welcome you. At any level you want to participate, go onto the website, do whatever you want, read, peruse, join. There is a Santa Rosa chapter with a representative here. And what you get to do is learn and participate with whatever energy and time you wish. We're pushing for a carbon tax. It's called putting your money where your mouth is. It's the price of civilization. We can get this done. I'd like you to meet my granddaughters. Just turned 2. And if I ever feel like I should take a day off from this struggle, I think of them, frankly. Because I can't go to the finish line of my life without doing everything I can, to leave them a future. Thank you.